episode of we're going to read a story. First of all, we're going to read the Bible, and then we're going to do this episode. Where's Baby Yoda? There he is. And then after this episode, we're going to be reading Hittite Warrior. Have you enjoyed my lecture, like button, subscribe, and hit the button on the video. Here's my dad to do the Bible time. See ya. Okay, that's part of the copyright. See ya.
Hello, Dead Man. Dead Man. All right. So we are on Ecclesiastes Chapter 6, which might just be the shortest chapter in the book of Ecclesiastes. So let's go ahead and get started. As always, this is the English Standard Version. Let me go. There is an evil that I have seen under the sun, and it lies heavy on mankind. A man to whom God gives wealth, possessions, and honor, so that he lacks nothing of all that he desires. Yet God does not give him power to enjoy them, but a stranger enjoys them. This is vanity. It is a grievous evil. If a man fathers 100 children and lives many years, so that the days of his years are many, but his soul is not satisfied with life's good things, and he also has no burial, I say that a stillborn child is better off than he. For it comes in vanity and goes in darkness, and in darkness its name is covered. Moreover, it has not seen the sun or known anything, yet it finds rest rather than he. Even though he should live 1,000 years twice over, yet enjoy no good, do not all go to the one place? All the toil of man is for his mouth, yet his appetite is not satisfied. For what advantage has the wise man over the fool? And what does the poor man have who knows how to conduct himself before the living? Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of the appetite. This also is vanity and a striving after wind. Whatever has come to be has already been named, and it is known that what man is, and that he is not able to dispute with one stronger than he. The more words, the more vanity, and what is the advantage to man? For who knows what is good for man while he lives the few days of his vain life, which he passes like a shadow? For who can tell man what will be after him under the sun? That is the end of Ecclesiastes Chapter 6. So, what? Oh, so we're on Hittite Warrior. Now we're on chapter 12. And I will just say in the last chapter, we met some Bible characters in the last couple of chapters. Some Bible characters. One of them was known as the woman from Rama. And the woman from Rama was Deborah. And of course she was with Barak. And we remember that story because that was the wonderful story that we read in the Bible, in which a woman impaled a man with a tent peg in his temple. So that, while he was sleeping, that story is the most wonderful. Yes, the Bible version of While You Were Sleeping. That's what Mom just said.
My gosh, Mom.
That is the most wonderful Bible story. It's like a bedtime story that we should all tell to our children. Not really. All right, so
I'm gonna scream at them.
I mean, it's fine. You can read it to your children. It's fine.
No.
But maybe not the most pleasant thing to think about when you're going to bed. All right. So what happened? What in this story is that Deborah was there, and Uriah and Jotham and Jabin were there, and she saw that Jabin was innocent, and she took tent stakes and impaled Uriah and Jotham through the head. Here's Kimberly to say how it really happened.
And you say my synopsises are long. So what actually happened is she found everybody was clear to be like not like guilty of anything or spies for Canaan. So she basically they spent the beginning of the chapter saying, oh yeah, this person's gonna judge you, and if you're judged if your judging goes south, then you're pretty much gonna get sacrificed. But if it's good, then you're good. And everybody was fortunately safe this time. I'm gonna hand it off to Dad, who's going to read a story. I'm sorry about your pillows.
Hi, I'm back, also front, and I want to just clarify real fast, it was not Deborah who impaled the man with the stake. Deborah was, of course, the wife of Lapidoth, and the person who impaled the man with the stake was the wife of Aber, Jael, the wife of Aber. But it's also very interesting that there is a character in that same story named Yabin, which is the name of the little boy in the story that we're reading. So that is very interesting. All right, so let's keep going. We're on chapter 12. What are we doing?
The switch turned on for whatever reason.
All right, no.
I'm just showing you.
Okay, yeah, it's going to fall apart. All right, so this is chapter 12. The Lord is a man of war. And all of that's in quotation marks, so I think maybe it's a quotation from something. All right. Chapter 12, the Lord is a man of war. In the morning, a fatted lamb was slain in the barnyard in honor of Barak of Kadesh and Deborah, the wife of Lapidoth. All day the hired herdsman tended the sheep alone while the family of Hushai prepared for the celebration to come. Fires were lit and the meat was prepared in great kettles with the garlic, leeks, and beans that accompanied it. Leah baked bread in an oven, and Tamar made honey cakes on a pan over a fire of coals. That night, all the family of Hushai gathered in the main tent, together with the guests. The servants and herdsmen clustered about outside for their share in the feasting and entertainment. There were 2 other guests that night, a man and his wife who had traveled in from the east and planned to pitch their tent in the plain not far from Kadesh. The man was a Kenite named Aber, not a Hebrew, but his wife, whose name was Jael, was a woman of Israel. I promise I wasn't trying to give this away. I hope that, well, I don't know. We'll find out. Heber was a shifty-eyed, smiling man who reminded me of the Babylonian traders of my childhood. He told everyone of his admiration for the Hebrews and his hatred for the Canaanites. My Jael can tell you what they are, he said. She was stolen from her family by their troops when she was only a child. Out of pity, I bought her from them and made her my wife. But the woman, Jael, did not speak at all, and only once looked at her husband with such hatred that my blood turned cold. And when he spoke to her, his voice was harsh and cruel. Looking at this silent, dark woman, I thought of my sister Anitis, and for the first time I was glad I knew for certain that she was dead. Though Deborah was a woman, she was served first that night, for she was a holy woman. When family and guests had been satisfied, the rest was turned over to the servants. The meal was not silent tonight. Everyone seemed to have been seized with a strange excitement and joy. Among the servants was one who could play the bagpipes, and one who handled the drum with great skill. When the food was gone, the men began to dance the ancient dances. The dances, they said, were pleasing to their God, one by one, while the others clapped their hands, stamped their feet, and uttered blood-curdling cries. Do you know the dances? I asked Jotham, clapping my hands with the rest, for none could resist the pipes and the drums and the stamping feet. I knew them once, he said, and for a moment his eyes gleamed at the memory. Then his face saddened, and he drew back. But it was a long time ago. When they had tired themselves with dancing, Deborah offered us all a treat, a brew of the tea leaves of which she was so fond. Jotham's uncle, she said, had given her her first taste of the leaves as a gift on one of his trading trips inland. But even this could not spoil her pleasure in them. She brewed the drink with her own hand with much ceremony, then passed the pot around to each of us for a sip of the steaming, fragrant liquid. While our hearts were warm from the pleasant drink, Barak asked for some of the old songs and stories. She is a learned woman, he explained to us, and knows all the histories of the tribes. Deborah had with her a harp which she strummed softly as she began her stories. The light of the torches was on her face, making it seem somehow as ancient as the tales she told. Stories of Abraham, the mighty chief from the outlands of Sumeria, who had been guided to Canaan by the great sky god El 1,000 years before, and whose people were the fathers of so many of the Canaanites and desert men. Stories of the shepherd chief Jacob and his sons, whose people had been lords in Egypt for 200 years, of Joshua the mighty and Moses the lawgiver, who had been a prince of Egypt. The Red Sea song, said little Aphia, who was half asleep. Sing the Red Sea song. There was a sudden silence. Every voice and every movement ceased. I saw that what little Aphia had said had some strange meaning among these people. I heard the wife of Heber, the Kenite, catch her breath, and saw her eyes come to life for the first time. Heber herself was watching with an eager, puzzled look. Deborah sat with lowered head for a moment that seemed to make a choice. It is Barak, she said gently, who must sing the Red Sea song. And Barak rose to his feet and sang the song, while Deborah struck great chords on her harp. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and his hosts hath he cast into the sea. Who is like unto thee, O Lord, among the gods? Sing ye to the Lord, for he hath triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider hath he thrown into the sea. Soft murmurs and even sobs rose among the people while the song was sung. Barak stood like a god himself, and it did not matter any more that he was not tall, and suddenly I knew what their secret must be. For this, I was sure, was a battle song to be sung only in time of war. Jotham had said they had no leader. It seemed they had found one. That's the end of that chapter. And the next chapter, chapter 13, is called The Raiders. But first, Cindy Stockton, one of my faithful listeners, asked how to spell Hushai. So let me look for it in the text here. Hushai. 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 So that's how to spell Hushai. All right. So I'm going to continue on now to chapter 13, The Raiders. That night, when Jotham slept, I slid silently from my bed of robes. Deborah, Barak, and Hushai I knew were not asleep. They had gone to Deborah's tent, and there was a light within. I snaked along the ground without a sound, as I learned to do at home, and stretched myself along the tent pins, one ear to the ground, and the other listening for every word from within the tent. 3 dark shadows moved eerily on the colored hangings. There will be a council of the chiefs in Kadesh, said the quiet voice of Barak. So, it has come at last, said Hushai softly. Yes, said the voice of Deborah. Poor and scattered as we are, it has come at last. We have suffered slavery and death, and the theft of our children. But when they command us to give our girls to the service of Astarte, and build high places for Shan the serpent, that is an insult to our God. That we cannot endure, even if we are utterly destroyed." "We will not be destroyed," said Barak calmly. "We are not alone in this." "The ox was sacrificed," said Deborah, "and its portion sent to the chiefs of all the tribes in the old sign of war. But only you came to me, Barak. Only you were faithful." "The tribesmen in the south," said Barak, "and in the cities on the coast are men of property. They will not risk their wealth or their safety, but we are not alone. I have had word from runners. The chiefs of Issachar and Benjamin in the hills have heard us at last, and of Zebulun too. They will be in Kadesh within 3 days." "5 tribes," said Hushai, and I would see his shadow counting on its fingers. I could see. "Will that not give us 10,000 men?" My mouth fell open at this. 10,000 men was a great army. It was surely some mighty host against which they planned to rise. "And what of their chariots?" said Deborah, "and their horses from Egypt?" "The horse and its rider," said Barak simply, "he hath thrown into the sea." I could almost see Deborah smile. "Yes," she said, "and God has told me in a vision that they will be delivered into our hands, but he has not told me how." "That," said Barak, "he has left to me." "It will be as it was in the days of Joshua the Great," whispered Hushai, "who leveled Jericho and drove out the Egyptian governors and raised the altar stones in Gilgal. The men of Israel will walk again in safety on the highways, and their stolen children will no longer die by the furnaces of Canaan, nor their strong men grinding in the mills. We will raise our standard," said Barak, "on Mount Tabor, near the great salt lake. It will be a good place for men of the north and men of the south to gather. It will give us a stronghold and a place for retreat where their chariots cannot follow. The hills have always sheltered us. They were why we were not utterly destroyed even by the Egyptians." "God be with us all," said Hushai again. The talk was over, and 2 shadows lengthened as the men within the tent rose to their feet. In alarm, I uncoiled myself and began my silent slide back through the undergrowth. My head was swimming with what I had heard, but as I moved, a shadow crossed me, and I could just make out in the darkness a figure of a man dressed like a hired shepherd, hurrying away from the tent of Deborah. And so I knew that I was not the only one who had spied on the talk in the tent, but I could not see who it had been, nor could I speak of it to anyone without giving myself away. Heber the Kenite, with his wife and servants, left the encampment early in the morning. They were to pitch their own tents in the valley not far away. I stared after them as they left, wondering if one of them had been that shadow I had seen the night before. When I had watched them out of sight, I turned back to the tent, still thinking deeply, and into one of the most fearful and fateful days of my life. First, I quarreled with Jotham, so that he and I parted enemies that morning. This was the first bad omen. Next, I almost lost my life. It happened because Tamar and I had gone to a spring for more water during the midday meal and had gotten out of sight of the others. I liked being with Tamar. She could do almost anything a man could do, but was gentle and kind as well. Besides, I liked to look at her. But this morning I was thinking of many things, of what I had heard outside the tent of Deborah, of the bitter things Jotham had said to me, and of the things I had said to him. So I had little to say. "Jotham is homesick," said Tamar suddenly, as if she had known what I was thinking. "That's what is wrong with him." "Homesick?" I laughed. "He hated Tyre. He only wanted to return to the tribes." "But the people of Tyre are his people too," said Tamar wisely. "In the ancient days before Abraham came, when the mother goddess ruled supreme in Canaan, they said that a child was more its mother's than its father's. Besides, he loves a woman of Tyre." How do you know that? I asked, amazed. She only smiled. If you're not careful, I said gloomily, you will grow into another one such as Deborah, and she is a fine lady, but one such is enough. Tamar was suddenly grave. I will never be like her. She is a woman of God. Which one? I asked angrily, but Tamar did not answer. She was looking over my shoulder, and suddenly I blinked in wonder, for I saw that her skin had turned the gray color of an olive tree. I looked where she was looking. 4 men, strangers, were standing together not far away and were looking us over, not menacingly, but in a calm, businesslike way. 2 of them had their heads together and seemed to be having a discussion. They have seen us, whispered Tamar. What is it? I asked her. Who are they? Lookouts from a Midianite caravan, said Tamar in a dead, hopeless voice. We heard they would pass here on the way to Hashereth, but I forgot. For a moment the word Hashereth stuck in my mind. Then I forgot it, remembering what Jotham had said about Midianite and Moabite and Amalekite raiders. They have grown great and prosperous by trading in men and women. For the first time I understood what it meant to be a Hebrew shepherd in the hills of Canaan. Tamar, I said, run back to the others. Then I said, no, not that. They will only follow and catch you. And if you lead them to the others, they may take everyone, for there will be more of them. Hide down behind that rock, and I will see what I can do. Tamar obeyed me, though I knew she had no hope. The men were coming toward us. I stood back against the rock so that none of them could slip around behind me. I picked up a heavy, jagged stone and swung the sling that all shepherds carry to protect themselves and their sheep. The men came slowly, none of them wanting to be the one to get that stone. One of them moved out ahead of the others, and I fitted the stone into the sling. Be wise, they called to me. You Hebrews are outside the law. Raise your hand against us, and you will be skinned alive in Harosheth. I swung the sling about my head and let the stone fly. It landed against the chest of the man in front, jerking him back, and he fell to the ground. The other 3 came together in a huddle. I picked up another stone. Rush him, said one of the men. Kill him if you must. The girl alone should bring a good enough price. I let fly another stone, which caught one of the men on the arm. He gave a great cry, but was not badly hurt. The 3 men came upon me in a rush. I had time to pick up my stave, and was able to catch one of the men across the jaw and send him sprawling before it was torn away from me. The other 2 got hold of me. I felt my arms and body twisted, something in my back forcing me to my knees, and cried out in pain and terror. Suddenly I was jerked to one side, and then I felt myself free. The 2 men had forgotten Tamar. She had come out from behind the rock with a heavy stick and fallen upon the 2 of them. Never since that day have I thought that women are useless. Her face twisted and her eyes blazing. She brought the stick down upon the head of the first one, then the other, and they fell at her feet. But then it seemed as though she could not stop. She stood over one of them like the war goddess, Anath, and struck him again and again, crying bitterly all the time. Tamar, Tamar, I protested. I climbed to my feet, got the club away from her, and pulled her away. I made her run with me till we had gotten far enough from them to be safe, though if they were alive, they were surely not able to pursue us. Then we sat down to rest, Tamar doubled over and sobbing as if she would be shaken to pieces. I hate them! I hate them! I hate them! She gasped. They took my sisters and 3 of my brothers and sold them to Canaan, so that only Samuel, Aphia, and I are left. If I could kill them all, and all the men in all the Canaanite cities, I would do it. I know, I soothed her. I even stroked her hair, which felt very pleasant. I had never known a girl like her before. I thought of her being dragged away to the copper furnaces or one of the dark, airless weaving rooms, and shuddered. I thought of what I had heard the night before in the tent of Deborah, and for the first time my heart exulted as if I had been one of them. I even felt that someday I might come to understand Samuel. The sun was low in the sky by the time we rose to go. As we started back to the tents, her hand was in mine. It was thin and strong, but small and soft and warm as well. Jotham, I thought. I will find him and make it up with him. I know now why his heart is with these people, and I will help him all I can. But Jotham was nowhere to be seen, and it was Jabin who came to greet us. Uriah Tarhund, he shouted, I have helped to kill a wolf. And he told how, while we had been gone, an animal had attacked some straying sheep, and he had given the alarm and helped drive it off. He was swelling with pride. Where is Jotham? I asked him. His face fell. He is gone. Gone? I cried. Where? To Kadesh. Barak and Hushai are going to do something very important there, and Barak chose him to go too. He brightened a little. Samuel wants to be chosen, but Barak said it was to be Jotham. My heart was heavy with disappointment, but I was glad Jotham had been chosen. Tamar's hand was still in mine, and I brightened too, thinking of the good day's work we too would have to tell about to the others. Out of the shadows came Samuel, and I opened my mouth to tell him the story of the day and receive his thanks for saving his sister. Let go of my sister's hand, said Samuel. My mouth still open, I stared at him. With a shock, I saw that his eyes were full of wrath. All his anger at Jotham for being chosen had been turned against me. Go to mother, he said to Tamar. For a moment Tamar paused, but she was too tired now to stand against anyone, and after a moment she slipped away. Never speak to her again, said Samuel. I will speak to her whenever I like, I replied. Then I will kill you, said Samuel. She is my true sister, the child of my mother, and I have the right. He swung around and left me before I could speak again. I was filled with wrath. Even the water from the spring tasted bitter to me. Perhaps that was the real reason for what I did that night, even more than the memory of my father. Chapter 14 is called The Betrayal. The first word is Samuel, and it's super short, so let's go ahead and do it. All right, chapter 14, The Betrayal. Samuel and I had been invited to eat in the tent of Deborah that night. Leah and Tamar were there too, but I neither looked at nor spoke to Tamar. I felt bitter even against her. Deborah brewed her tea and passed it around in little bowls. She chatted with Leah like any other woman of wonderful linens from Egypt and camphors from the east for keeping moths out of wool, and the latest hairstyles of the women of fashion in Babylon. After a little of this, I began to shift about rudely on my goatskin rug, and finally yawned loudly in the middle of a remark about the new shops in the town of Shiloh. There was an embarrassed silence. People were not supposed to yawn at Deborah, but Deborah was not angry. It is hard, she said, for young men when the older men are away at council and there is nothing for them to listen to but the gossip of women. We will talk of other things. And she began to tell us the story of a great battle of long ago in Egypt, when the finest army of Pharaoh had massed on the borders of the two lands to keep out a scattered and savage band of invaders. And which army do you think was destroyed? She asked. I can tell you that, I replied, eager to show off what I had learned from the books entire. It was the army of Pharaoh, for Egypt had no horses in those days, and the invaders had gotten them from our people, the Hittites in the north. And I thought, if the finest army of Pharaoh could not stand against chariots, what could a half-armed mustering of Hebrew shepherds do against the chariots of Canaan? Samuel was thinking the same thing, and he gave me an angry look. If the Lord had been on Egypt's side, he said, she would have had no need of chariots. What would you have done? Said Deborah, looking straight at me. Why, I stammered. Then I collected my thoughts and spoke more surely. If I had been the captain of Pharaoh's hosts, I would have taken my men into the hills. Samuel snorted. Wise man, there are no hills in Egypt. There are hills here, I said, forgetting that I was not supposed to know what we were really talking about. Samuel had forgotten too, and in his eagerness he blurted out, And do you think that Sisera is a fool who would risk his horses on rough ground? Sisera, the name that I had forgotten for so long, hit me like a blow between the eyes. Sisera, a man named Sisera, he will help you for my sake. I could feel the blood rush from my head, leaving me dizzy. Who? I began, and then managed to finish. Who is Sisera? Samuel now gave Deborah an uneasy look, realizing that he had said more than he meant. Deborah was silent a moment, then sighed. Our young friend is not a fool, she said. I do not think we have hidden much from him. Sisera, she added quietly, is the chief of Harosheth, he who is the captain of all the hosts of Canaan when they join together in battle. Have you never heard his name? They frighten children with him here in the hills. His hand is heavy as iron upon all of inland Canaan, and his evil city swallows its victims as a serpent swallows small animals, and even the Canaanites fear him. But he is a great warrior who went to Carchemish in his youth, and learned from the Hittites the arts of war and horses and chariot fighting. It was the same man. My father, too, had been sent to the Hittite city of Carchemish in Amor to learn of horses and chariots, for there were great teachers there. Once, when I was little, he had told me of a young Canaanite prince whom he had known there, whose life he had saved when a horse broke and ran with him, and with whom he had sworn friendship. But I had forgotten the story. What is the matter with you? Samuel was saying, for I was not able to sit still, but I had gotten up and walked about the tent. I mumbled an excuse and sat down again, staring at the firelit faces. Sisera was the chief of Harosheth. Sisera was the captain of the hosts of Canaan. Sisera was my father's sworn friend. These people were his enemies, and I sat among them and ate their bread. This is what had come of my breaking my promise to my father and blaspheming against Moloch. The gods had punished me indeed. Are you sick, child? Deborah asked me, and she said it so like a mother that I wanted to cry, for I already knew the treachery that I was going to commit. That night I told the others that it was lack of air within the tent that made me faint, and that I would sleep at the door of the tent, and lying under the stars I thought of what I must do. I had taken the hospitality of the Hebrews and eaten food in their tents. To turn against them now would be a black betrayal, but to stay with them would be to break my promise to my dead father once and for all, and to set my hand against his friend, and that would be worse than any other treachery. Besides, I told myself, these people were not my friends. Jotham was gone without a word. Tamar had not stood behind me, and at the thought of Samuel, I knew what I had to do. I unwound myself from my robe and got up. The moon was still high. I crept to the tent door, listened, and peered in to make sure that the others were asleep. Some moonlight from the entrance had fallen across the face of the sleeping Yabin. His mouth was a little open, and his cheeks were flushed. Blasphemy or no blasphemy, I was glad I had helped to save him from Moloch. I wished that I could say goodbye to Jotham, and when I thought of Tamar, I almost wavered. But I did not. There were skins in the yard and water in the well, and I supplied myself with what I would need to drink on a day's journey. I stole some cheese, too, from the tents, and some bread. I had no time to lose, and gathering up my supplies and setting my course by the stars, I ran from the tents, heading toward Harosheth. That is the end of chapter 14, and the next chapter, chapter 15, is called How I Came to Harosheth, and the first word is the or the, whichever way you prefer to pronounce it. The How I Came to Harosheth is the title of the chapter. So we will read that tomorrow, along with chapter 16, the priest of Moloch. So I hope that you're enjoying this story. This is Hittite Warrior, and we will be back for more fun, hopefully tomorrow. And excuse me, I can't think of anything else to say, so God bless you. Have a super night, and we will see you again next time. God bless.